Hello and welcome to Kloeker's Education Foundation, providing quality content for amazing teachers and students. If you're joining us from a previous lesson or previous video, welcome back. And if this is your first time, we're glad you're here. This is our World History series, and this lesson is on the Renaissance. Now don't forget you can check out the link in the description below for a set of free guided notes to go along with this lesson. And while you're there, you can go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, so we can continue to expand our reach and educate more. So let's dive in. Now this photo you see, this is the skyline of Florence, Italy, which is going to be one of the focal points of the Renaissance. We're going to break down that in this overview. But this building right here, the Duomo, as it was called, is a Catholic church. And the architecture that went into building the dome that you see was one of the first of its kind, and that process is going to revolutionize architecture for future generations. The word Renaissance is a word you may be unfamiliar with. It means a rebirth. So let's talk about what caused this rebirth. The Crusades are going to be a huge turning point for Western civilization. It is a watershed moment where history could have gone one way or the other. With the Crusades, we see that medieval powers from Western Europe have gone to the Middle East and experienced the dedication, the learning that is happening within those Muslim caliphates, the dedication to preserving ancient knowledge, and they bring back that spirit of learning back to Western Europe when they return. Now, Italy was the launching point for many of the Crusades, and so Italy, not only geographically at the center of the Mediterranean, economically, they had a ton of wealth to spend after the Crusades because they made all the money from financing supplies to the Crusaders, from transportation. They were the economic center for it. We saw that learning has not only been brought back from the Middle East, but also as the Umayyad dynasty, caliphate in Spain, the Moors in Spain, that scholarship is going to trickle from Spain into southern France and into Italy as well. And so with all this advanced knowledge coming to Italy, all of the wealth gathered in Italy, we see that the Italian leaders, the families, are spending it not just on technology and advancements for their city, but also to be patrons of the arts. They are putting money into the arts of Europe. In modern education, we think of school and college, and it looks much differently back then. We see a technology that is made and then becomes widely copied and imitated throughout Europe and changes the name of the game, especially in education, and that is the printing press. Invented in 1455 by Johannes Gutenberg, he is going to be able to print books off of this machine. Now, the first book he prints is the Bible, and of course, that is a huge emphasis for the story of Christianity in Europe. But what this printing press means is you can mass produce books one at a time. Instead of having to get a monk in a monastery who knew how to read and write and had to write it and copy everything down word for word by hand, in this you could make a press for a page and press out 50 of them and make 50 copies of that page pretty quick. And that means books are more accessible and they become significantly cheaper. People are traveling around Europe, so we have travel books to, of course, tell you where to stop, where to stay, what the customs are like in language. We have medical journals spreading knowledge, and this Renaissance not just is going to spark the Reformation, but also is going to spark the scientific revolution as well. People are becoming more educated, they're learning how to read, and books will eventually begin being printed in the vernacular, the local language. And so people do not have to understand Greek or Latin in order to be able to read. They can read it in French or Italian. They can read it in German or English, and it is made accessible to the people. Italy is the focal point, and we are going to have a whole lesson dedicated solely to the Renaissance in Italy because it is that important to this era. Now, the Italian city-states, just to give an overview, they gained much of that wealth during the Crusade for transportation and supplies. But Italy is broken up. It's not a unified country, and so these city-states are competing against each other, vying for power, whether it's economically or militarily. We see the rise of one city-state in the Renaissance, Florence, being run by the Medici. Now, this family is a family of bankers. They become one of the wealthiest families in history. At the time, they were the wealthiest in the world. They are going to be rich enough where they are going to put their children and grandchildren into the church, into the thrones of Europe, like Catherine de' Medici, who is going to be Queen of France. They are going to be hugely instrumental, especially with their banking system. Their money becomes the standard currency for most of Europe. Yes, a family in one city started printing money so consistently and so well liked and standard that it became the standard currency for most of Europe. Now, of course, this upsets a lot of people. One of the people this upsets is the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Empire is going to be ruled by Charles V. He is the king and emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and he is king of Spain as well. And he is going to be in a conflict with the French and the other Italian city-states, and we'll talk about this more as we get into Italy, but this is how the Renaissance kind of fades out, and that is the Holy Roman Empire fighting the French and the Italians and the Pope. The Spanish, the Holy Roman Empire, is going to be short on money, and so instead of trying to defeat the French and the Italian city-states and the Pope and occupy Italy, they're going to begin sacking major cities, including the sack of Rome and the Vatican in 1527. I believe there's a band called Sabaton that has a song about it, if you like heavy metal. And it is during this time that we see Machiavelli writing the book The Prince, and this is going to reflect politics of the time, not just from the Medici ruling from Florence and impacting the entire history of Europe, but also the war between the Cognac League and the Holy Roman Empire. You can see on this map how fractured Renaissance Italy was, how divided it was. Now, I'm going to introduce some of the big players, of course. You have the Kingdom of Sicily dominating the southern half. They are going to be one of the largest military powers within Italy. They are going to have a short war with Florence and Milan, which will ultimately end when one of the Medicis come to the Kingdom of Sicily and hands out so much money that the people start protecting him and he bankrupts their economy. They have incredible wealth from the Crusades. You have the Papal States, of course, Rome, all the way up to Bologna. You have Florence. Again, economically, they are the hub. Culturally, artistically, they are going to be the center of the Renaissance for most of it. And then we see it shift down to Rome for a little bit, but Florence was the main hub. The Venetians, of course, going to be very important with their navy, and of course they're the border between the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottoman, and then Milan and Genoa, they're going to be allied and have this struggle between Florence and the French of who they're going to be allied with. Now, the Renaissance is going to be happening at the same time as the Age of Exploration. During this time, we see that European powers like Spain completing the Reconquista in 1492, they're going to hire an Italian merchant sailor, Christopher Columbus, pictured top right, to find a new trade route to India. Again, trying to expand their economic power, and this is, of course, how he arrives in the New World. Now, during this time, the misconception, Europeans knew that the earth was round. We've known that since the time of the Greeks. We simply did not know how large, or let me rephrase that, if there was going to be a landmass to the west if we kept sailing, and history tells us Christopher Columbus figured that out, and now we have the New World. Portugal, France, England, the Netherlands, all of them are going to be vying to try and establish new markets for themselves. And again, the emphasis is on wealth. Political thought being driven by Machiavelli's book, Current of the Time, The Prince, and of course the Medici, who are pretty much funding Western Europe at this time. The Renaissance could not have happened without vast sums of money, and all of that is centered in the merchant class in Italy. City-states are dominated by the merchants and traders. Florence is going to be unique, though, because the city-state of Florence is a republic. They elect their leader as opposed to others which have a royal family, a king or a doge. The Medici family economically is going to control Florence. Cosimo de' Medici, pictured bottom left, he is going to be the one who establishes Florence as the center for the Renaissance. He is going to create the florin, which becomes the currency of Florence, the currency of the Catholic Church, and then becomes pretty much a standard currency across Europe. All of the money is being printed from one city in Italy. His grandson, Lorenzo, pictured top right, he is going to be the Medici that really supports the arts and begins that artistic movement that we know. Leonardo da Vinci is going to be supported by the Medici family. Donatello is going to be supported by the Medici family. Michelangelo begins and got his start under the Medici family. And so that nations that control the wealth are controlling most of the power. And unlike Florence, which is the economic hub, the banking hub of Europe, the rest of Europe is pretty much trying to find their wealth overseas and trying to establish colonies for raw goods, and thus begins mercantilism. But we'll talk about that in our Age of Exploration unit. Earlier in this lesson, we talk about how reading is becoming more accessible as books become more accessible and become cheaper, as well as being published in the vernacular, the local language, instead of Latin or Greek. This is going to spark a huge birth of culture, especially as you get farther and farther away from Italy, in places like Germany and England. In England, we see the rise of a very famous writer by the name of Shakespeare, who's going to use the themes of the Renaissance, the humanistic, secular themes, and apply that to his stories. We see new techniques in art, making it more three-dimensional, such as Leonardo da Vinci's observations and his obsession with how the human body works and the new inventions, as well as several of his famous pieces of art, such as the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. We are going to see huge strides in art. Michelangelo will develop St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. This is, of course, the center of the Vatican. He is going to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which becomes iconic when we talk about art. He has the statue of David, as you can see on the bottom right. Other artists like Raphael is going to have his painting of Madonna and Child, which I'll show you in just a moment. He is going to connect a lot of the themes out of classical civilizations, the Romans and the Greeks, and of course Donatello, who's going to have a statue of David. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, of course, will have his art as well, and these four make up the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles. They're named after a Renaissance artist. And before we go any further, we talked about ancient Rome in several of our last lessons. We talked about it in a previous unit all by itself. When we look at Rome, and we've seen the iconic photos of the Colosseum and how about half of it is missing, and people are wondering, well, why can't they just rebuild it? A lot of that stone, that marble that was used to build the Colosseum is currently the building blocks for St. Peter's Basilica. They took stones, marble from the Colosseum, reshaped them, and placed them in the construction of St. Peter's. We see an intellectual rebirth with the focus of humanism on human potential and achievement through past civilizations. Popular subjects like history, literature, philosophy all make a huge comeback, and these get clumped together as the humanities. You may have heard that in your current school. There's an emphasis on secularism, straying away from the age of faith, less emphasis on religion, more emphasis on a worldly view of the here and the now. And of course, this is all facilitated with the printing press spreading knowledge and books. We see changes within religion, especially with Christian humanists like Erasmus, pictured bottom right, Sir Thomas More, bottom middle, who are addressing how to improve society through Christian motives, through the church, but with less emphasis on the ceremony of religion. And we do see some corruption within the Catholic Church through things like simony, the sale of indulgences, and several priests having a very worldly lifestyle that is going to be brought into question. And we saw this with Martin Luther and his 95 Theses, of the 95 things he wanted to change in the Catholic Church. And of course, this leads to the Reformation, which is a whole unit in our series. And so the larger effects of the Renaissance. We re-examine the classical text, the Romans, the Greeks, their art, their literature gets renewed. We see focus on architecture, focus on arts, politics, religion, science, and education, all of which were important to those ancient European civilizations. And because we focus in on these topics, we see strides in these areas. We see huge achievements in art, in literature, architecture, and in music. We see new intellectual ideas, humanism focusing on human achievements, focusing on the now being present as opposed to the afterlife. We see it reflected in the writing, we see it reflected in the artwork of the Renaissance, and this notion of a Renaissance man, person who has many interests and many talents. That is going to wrap up this overview, this lesson. Thank you so much for watching. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check us out on Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Rumble, and the Kloeker Education Foundation website. We have a ton of resources there that you might like and enjoy. To see what's new and what's next in our series as we dive into why Italy and the importance of the writers and the artists, click here. Click down below for something you might like, and to the right to subscribe to our channel. All this and more is just a click away. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.